Well, hey everybody, this is Chris DiFurio with Keys to the Shop. Welcome to another edition of Shift Break. Today's episode is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. It's a revolutionary brewer that is taking batch brew coffee to the next level. And I'm not saying that lightly. I've tasted what this machine can do, and many other coffee shops all around the world are experiencing the kind of flavors that this machine with its SCA award-winning technology can unlock from their coffee. It's like getting to know your coffee all over again. It's truly amazing. And pardon the pun here, but it's not only a groundbreaking brewer, but it's also a very versatile piece of equipment, making your business versatile as well, because it can brew hot chocolate, it can brew tea, batch cold brew, and batch diced lattes, as well as game-changing batch brew coffee. So if high quality and versatility is something you're looking for your business, then I highly advise you to check out the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. You can find out more information about how to get this in your store by visiting their website, vogacoffee.com. That's VOGA coffee.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Espressly. Espressly creates amazingly functional, beautifully designed, custom-branded mobile apps for your business. They work with independent coffee shops to create this connection between the experience that your customers love and the convenience of a mobile app. And these options for your business are going to stay around for a long time. Mobile ordering is something that has just become further cemented into the retail coffee landscape. And working with Espressly to create your own branded app really sets you apart because it, again, delivers that experience that you've worked so hard at creating for your customers. And you don't have to sacrifice anything when it comes to mobile apps when you're working with Espressly. It's a no-risk model. There's no setup or development fees. This integrates with Square. It has a drive-through payment scanner, receipt and label printing capabilities, and you keep all the data. If this is something you want to learn more about for your store, go visit them over at their website, espressly.co. That's espressly.co. Okay, well, today I wanted to talk with you about training, in particular, something that happens in the training process that is kind of in the way of actual learning and preparing people to be successful on the bar, and that's TMI. And I'm not talking about sharing your family drama with the people that you're training and onboarding. I'm talking about how we share so much information about the coffee and the science of the coffee and all of these types of bits of information that we pick up over the years that it will overwhelm a new hire. When you're in the onboarding process, it's all about setting the tone. I mean, think about it like this. Your staff are your customers, right? So I've said this on the show before. Your customers, when they come into the space, when they're greeted by the register barista and they go through the whole experience, that first impression they get, that's setting the tone for the entire experience. When the barista comes into your business, the experience they have during the onboarding process, especially in the first couple of days, is very critical. And in the training process, that's the inner sanctum. As far as they're concerned, that's where all the magic happens. And so their mind is on high alert. And so their mindset is going to be that of a person who is going to retain information because their job depends on it. So everything you say in the training lab is going to be taken as gospel for the most part. So when you're talking about TDS, when you're talking about extraction ratios, you're talking about terroir and all of these other things, because you are passionate about coffee and because you read a lot about coffee and you know, this is, if any place in the coffee shop, the place where we talk about these types of things, you know. The problem is that most baristas are not going to have an opportunity to practically use a lot of the information that we give them during the training process. So we waste a lot of time talking about things that in and of themselves are important, but in this context are not going to actually practically set the barista up for success. So when you're creating an onboarding process and you're thinking about the training process, you have to keep it simple. You have to constantly edit yourself. I share the same thing about interviews and how we tend to just go on and on and on about the values of our shop and the history of our shop and the story of how we almost dropped the roaster and the story of, this customer that came in, it was crazy. All this stuff that we share with the potential new hire, and we're not actually hearing from the new hire, right? We like to hear ourselves talk because we actually don't get to talk about coffee that often. And as a trainer, you often want to just have somebody to talk to about the latest extraction science. And it feels good to hear yourself talk about it. And it also feels good to see the barista get wide-eyed and be like, wow, I never knew that about coffee. And I'm not saying that you don't share these things at all necessarily, but the way that you share them and the amount of time that you take up to share them really matters. A lot of times the way we couch this information is as if we expect them to use it daily. And that's just not the case. For instance, if you mention something like the TDS of your coffee and that is a goal, you have a TDS goal for all of your brewed coffee, the question immediately pops up into the mind of the barista, well, where's the TDS meter? How do I use that? And if you have that and that's part of your job description for your baristas to do that kind of work, then great. But for the most part, we like to just pepper those things in and not really explain a whole lot about it. And then we put the barista on a shift and their head is swimming with all sorts of information about processing methods, extraction science, and the history of the espresso and all this other stuff that often is just spoken to them in the training lab because we don't know what else to say. We haven't really set up our training to be practical. It's more anecdotal, and so they're not really prepared. The most training a barista gets tends not to be in the training lab. It tends to be on shift with other baristas after they've been quote unquote trained. And that really is a waste of space, especially if you have a training lab. You need to make sure that you're using it for what it's for. Set them up for the skills that they're going to need to use on the bar. Now, it may be boring. It may not get really geeky about coffee in that session. It needs to be hands-on, simplified, slow and steady information so that you can respect the mind space of the barista and set them up for success on the shift. Later on, if you want to add more complicated information, if you feel like they've reached the point where they're tamping evenly, if you're not even getting a barista to tamp evenly at this point, there's no sense in talking to them about refractometers. There's absolutely no point in that. The fact that we have this equipment, maybe that's supposed to make them feel like this is a more legitimate job, or maybe that makes you feel like your role as a trainer is more legitimate, but it's really not going to make a difference either way. You just need to get them to tamp evenly and to clean their station and to steam the milk without burning it and et cetera. You can go on, where it's not just latte art that we get distracted with. It's all of these other things that, again, are good, but they don't really have a place in the initial onboarding of a barista outside of just these are maybe reasons why we have to tamp evenly, right? We have to tamp evenly because here's what water does, here's the why behind the what. If it's in that context, that's fine. But sometimes we just don't draw that line. And so I think we need to hold ourselves back from sharing too much information. Don't pretend like this is the last time you're ever going to speak to a barista in your shop about coffee. And for some of you, that's true, actually. This may be the only time that you talk to them about coffee. That needs to change. Training and communication and connection with our staff, it has to be a mainstay. Continued education and training. If you have that, you're not going to be so worried about cramming all that information in these few hours you have with them. Instead, you're going to be focused on giving them the information they need to do a good job and then build steadily from there as they grow in skill and in knowledge. And that's a great way to build a knowledgeable and skillful team. That's something I think we all want. So I hope that this information was helpful for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. And I'll see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break, from keys to the shop.